Welcome back to my channel. Maybe I should call you guys my little cataracts because it's kind of an inside joke where my last name was always very horribly mispronounced growing up, and one of the things that my sister was called was cataracts. So maybe I'll call you my little cataracts because, you know, we gotta see through the fog. But this video is going to be maybe a disaster, but I made a TikTok draft about this and I'm seeing it resurge again, and I think it's because of the election and a lot of very charged things that are happening right now. I got a lot of flack for posting about this on my TikTok, and like, you can look in the description. I will put all my social media there. Why are we talking about alternative people who are conservative? If you are goth or punk and claim to be conservative and say that with your whole chest, I'm honestly embarrassed for you. I'm honestly really embarrassed for you because you have missed the whole assignment. You not only didn't turn in your work and claim a dog ate it, but it has incinerated in Mount Doom for the last eternity. I am concerned. I'm concerned for people who wear manga hats and wear alternative shirts and show up in alternative spaces because by its very nature, you are a part of a subculture. And granted, the major element, let's just say, of being in a subculture is that you use, like, let's say goth and punk. That's really what we're going to be talking about in this ramble, in this unscripted ramble. But being goth and punk are music-based subcultures, but when you look to the root of where that came from and why we dress a certain way or why there are certain songs and lyrics that identify in those genres, now whether they are self-proclaimed that way or whether they are crowned that way, I'm very baffled as to how this has happened. And I say baffled, but I'm not really. It's more like a rhetorical baffle that we've gotten to this point. And it really is because subcultures are no longer based in philosophy or like a core ethos, right? There isn't like a core ideology that's holding current, like, quote unquote subcultures together. So let me explain what I mean by that. Goth and punk originated obviously from a lot of, people of color and marginalized voices and stemmed from a variety of things. So like goth stemmed from punk, but before obviously was rooted in things like Dracula and the macabre and, horror, whatever. These were rooted in an alternative lifestyle and a subculture where these people were rebelling against mainstream culture. That's why they're called subcultures, because they're not part of a mainstream bucket of thought. Mainstream thought is the status quo. It is, the establishment. It is a la Rage Against the Machine. What machine do you think they're talking about, guys? Like, they're not talking about a microwave. They're not talking about your mom's toaster. Like, they are talking about the machine as in the corporate conglomerate fascist machine. It's very strange to me because a lot of those early punk figures and musicians wore a lot of things and are in museums currently. I'll put a picture up on the screen if I can find the one that was circulating around, but they had very much abortion is healthcare and, schmuck-schmazzies, if I'm going to try to, one day monetize my channel. But that's besides the point. Where it adds to the point, because these people were against mainstream culture in its nefariousness and in its marginalization and its colonization of people. And a lot of punk figures came out as a form of rebellion against the World War II and the emergence of civil rights. There was this push to be heard and to rebel against the old, right? The old guard, the status quo is the best way I can put it. So imagine my surprise and people who come before me who have lived through these times to see, someone in a MAGA hat dancing to Rage Against the Machine. I don't understand how you can listen to this music of any sort, goth and punk specifically though. How can you listen to punk music and turn around and support the very thing that the music lambasts? I really want people to think long and hard about this. Understand the death of subculture and the rise of aesthetics and trends. To give an example, Y2K is an aesthetic. It's not based in any form of music or cultural phenomenon, right? There isn't something it's tied to, it's just tied to a time period, which means a lot of things. There's a lot of things that happened in the 2000s, trust me. Whereas punk was about rebelling against what was currently happening, which came with a juxtaposition and came with an aesthetic, right? Mohawks, and they even had some kind of combat boots and military gear and dark makeup in order to juxtapose against those types of figureheads, right? It was a form of commentary and rebellion and standing your ground. Y2K doesn't have that substance behind it. It doesn't have that message that translated in a lot of the music. So usually with the music came a look that the musicians had, and it was tied into deeper meanings. Goth has similar things because goth spun from punk and emerged and had a lot of similar themes, and I think does have a common thread of being alternative, not living conventionally, not ascribing to conventional norms and traditions, right? Anybody who is in, white face makeup and plodding around to Sisters of Mercy is not your typical Joe Schmo on the street, right? It really came about because of aesthetics and because of the rapidity of social media having trends and having these like rolling trends and these quick trends. They have Y2K, they have fairycore, they have cottagecore, they have the clean girl aesthetic, which was an appropriation of people of color, had been doing that decades before. So there is this homogenization and lost in thought link that's being broken between these looks and what they used to represent. I see a lot of people in spaces talking about, well, I used to look at a goth or punk person and feel safe, and now I don't. And in that case, I fully support, well, for legal purposes, I don't incite violence, but in my own opinion, those people deserve, not exist, let's just say. They deserve to get sucker punched straight in the face, figuratively, of course. Those people are not welcome, and I think the term gatekeeping has really gotten twisted over time because there are instances where gatekeeping is valid, i.e. you don't want at your show. Just point blank. Conservatives are not welcome in alternative spaces, and let me be clear that the true people who ascribe and live by the subculture and the art and media that it represents also ascribe to this. And in this instance, in this nuanced, gray take, as we all know, it's the grays, the gays, and everything in between here. I truly believe, in my opinion, that those types of people should not be welcome in spaces where they believe in the oppression and the ongoing, manipulation and hurt of other people, especially marginalized people. I think we need to celebrate and protect everyone in these community spaces, and that very much includes a lot of people who are minorities in these spaces have been, critiqued and harmed as well. All that to say that that's just my initial ramble here, and I want to do some deep dives on this, but I wanted to get this initial video out to talk about kind of this weird convergence. And AHS Coven really was the start, 10 years ago of when this started becoming cool. Gothic became a fashion and not just about the music subculture. It's really just grown legs and become commodified is what it is. We have brands like Killstar now and Hot Topic, and we could go into a ton of different ways that, it's become more accessible for people. And so a lot of people are coming into the fashion without understanding the roots and where it came from. That's where this disconnect is coming from, where you have alternative people who are manga wearers, It's very bizarre. It feels like I'm in the bad timeline when I see that. That should not be tolerated at all in those spaces, because by its very name, it's going against that. We could go into a whole diatribe about fascism, and I won't. Modern media, I think, really is losing its literacy and its nuance in the alternative crowd because it's just becoming a cash grab. It's just becoming another commodified piece of media, history, aesthetics that they can use and leverage to get money. And that's really what it's about. Unfortunately, it's become distilled and it's become watered down into really a simulacra of itself. It's just this weird echo of what it used to be on the main stage, because again, alternative wasn't meant to be this main stage. It wasn't meant to be, I don't know, the Brad Pitt of fashion. That's never what, goth and punk was about. And I believe it's still not. I believe it promotes individuality and uniqueness and a ton of other things, but also the ongoing, anti-fascist ideologies and not ascribing to these shitty policies and the ongoing subjugation and colonization of people. And I know a lot of people are going to feel some type of way about that, but I stand by that and say that with my whole chest and believe that true alternative people believe in that. You can't advocate for fast fashion and, truly be punk or goth. And that's not gatekeeping people who truly can't afford it. I'm not trying to say that you're less valid, but it's on a principle level, right? If you had the means, you wouldn't do that, typically. I get it is an outlet and a way for people to have that and to have a certain aesthetic and a fashion. If we were in a perfect world, it would not be something that we would need, and we would have much more sustainable practices and DIYs and things to do that. But whole other tangent. I'm gonna finish with something I had a TikTok about, and I will insert the TikTok in here if I can to give you a little bit of a digest. But I'll finish this off with talking about this weird divergence of conservative goths and conservative punks with the new Crow movie. Let me preface by saying I'm going to hold my judgment until the actual thing comes out, if I even decide to watch it. But for those of you who were not born in the 1900s and don't understand why there is some uproar and some dialogue going on about the new Crow movie, let me explain to you.
The second I saw this image, it raised a few questions to me, which it was confirmed in this Vanity Fair article that I read afterwards. My first question was, is this a remake or is this a different story using the same lore of The Crow? The answer to that is no. It is in fact Eric Draven, and it is him and Shelley Webster. So it is retelling or a remake of the original Crow movie that came out in 1994. Now, my second question slash point is Bill Skarsgård is an amazing actor. There's no debating that. But is this what 2020 kids are going to think like Goth is? And he looks like a SoundCloud rapper like everybody's saying. But to me, the first thing I thought of was like Suicide Squad Joker 2.0. And that obviously did not go over well for like most of the population and anybody who was a Joker fan. Now it's like parodied and it's like, the Joker tells my story. It's like this funny, like satirical, like parody element of what the Joker's actually supposed to represent. Now don't get me wrong, the original Crow is still really gothic, really edgy, and really angsty. And perhaps anybody who might not be in the subculture would look at this and think something similar. However, confirming some of the SoundCloud rapper's suspicions, some of the director's inspiration came from like the 90s, being in London, like having that kind of, I don't know, like edgy look. And the quote is what rang alarm bells for me in tandem with this image. It's the whoever fights monsters must be careful that they don't become one. Now those two pieces of information together is why I have a problem with the look and feel of this so far. Now Shelby, you may be asking, get to the point here. The director's quote about being a monster is a big reason why I feel like the heart of the media is going to be missed in this retelling. And I'm not saying you can't re-envision it or have another interpretation of it, but the whole point of The Crow is about like grief and love everlasting. And the whole point is that Eric Draven and his fiancée die, and a year later, The Crow gives him the gift of resurrection in order to exact vengeance upon the people who killed them. So it questions a lot of things about grief and how far you would go for the people that you love. At no point, at least in the original movie, and now the original movie arguably is a little bit self-aware, it's a little bit campy, it has all the elements of like comedy, action, drama, but I never felt that Eric Draven was worried about becoming a monster. That's what makes him an interesting character to me, is that he is in the depths of despair and grief, but he still shows humanity for other people in the film, and he's still doing, right things. And again, it raises questions of morality and ethics and whatever you want to call it, but that's part of the juxtaposition between the horrible things done to you, what justifies revenge, those kinds of things. But he always kind of retains this sense of humanity, especially when he talks to the mother and has that famous quote, "Mother is the name for God on the lips and hearts of all children." Would a stark raving lunatic try to convince the mother to be present for her daughter? That's just one example. Now, I did see some other people talking about this where yes, they could take it another angle, and there were things in the original comic that weren't really explored. There were different characters, and sure, I agree with that. So I have concerns that it's going to be simplified and some of the heart of it might get lost. I hope that's not the case, because the other image is kind of showing a picture of her in this kind of ghostly veil where their lips are touching. So this just isn't giving Eric Draven to me specifically, and the heart of the character and what it's trying to tell through the story. But I could be wrong. Yes, he was in a band, he was previously a musician, so arguably maybe some people's judgments on being a SoundCloud rapper, have some kind of basis, and maybe it's a tie of the director's making. I don't know, but either way, I think people are going to equate this look to what Goth should be, or what Goth should look like, and Goth, at the end of the day, is not about what you look like, it's about what you listen to. So I am curious how the soundtrack, since the original is so highly revered, is going to kind of link to the storytelling. So what do you think? I am a little bit kerfuffled at this, and I'm kind of not my bag, but again, it's aimed at people who are, he was saying, 19 and early 20s, being this is me. So I don't know. I'm in my 30s, what the fuck do I know? But 19-year-olds, early 20s people, do you look at this and be this is me? I don't know. I may pass on this one for now. Curious what people think. Maybe I'll just kind of hold my thoughts and final judgments for when it actually comes out in June. Maybe they'll surprise us. Maybe there's going to be a bunch of edginess, and it will have some depth to it, and it will still emulate the emotional beats of the original movie in 94 and the comic book itself. So I don't know. Maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised. I am, again, holding judgment, though. What do you think?
No, I totally forgot that this movie even came out. I saw some teasers of Bill Skarsgård back, I believe, in May or June, because I think the movie was supposed to come out in June, and my stomach dropped. Truly. I had a tummy ache for a variety of reasons. A lot of them are for the reasons I'm telling you, because I'm worried, and maybe I'll do a follow-up video of my impressions of the Crow movie, or maybe I'll do like a short TikTok or something. But my reservations about the Crow movie were the heart of it getting lost, because some of the premise the director had was about worrying about becoming a monster. Listen, the Goths, we love the Crow because it has melancholy, it's got action, it's got drama, but what it is not is this like circle jerk about being a monster. That's not what it's about. Really, at its core, it's about, love everlasting and him being gifted the ability to, enact vengeance for what was done to them. That's a whole other discussion of whether you think revenge is justified and if you should do that, but it's such a beautiful exploration of true adoration and love at any cost. I think that The Crow, in its aesthetics alone in the new movie, become a simulacra of alternative culture. It's lost the plot. You know what I mean? He looks more like a Suicide Squad Joker a la SoundCloud rapper than he does, a broody, bandmate who seems a little, alternative. And you can argue that that's just a granny take, that's just a, person from the 1900s take, and to that I say, you're probably right. I reserve full judgment until I see it, but these types of viewpoints into what's at the core, does it still have the heart? Does it still have the ethos? And does it still convey a message that gets you to think? Because I think one big thing in Goth and punk is there's depths to the lyricism, to the art, to the media that forces you to think on a deep, profound level. And that's why a lot of times it comes to these conclusions of equality, and it comes to these conclusions of, inclusion and love and living unconventionally and really just living authentic to yourself. I would say at its core, and I've probably said that a few times, but at its core, Goth and punk are about pushing against what society wants you to be, and you need to embrace like who you really are. And The Crow does that in a lot of ways. He doesn't lose his humanity. Even though he's resurrected, he still looks out for the people around him and the people who supported him and loved him while he was alive before. Just very confused, and maybe it's just, musings of an old person being nostalgic about keeping the sanctity and the integrity of a subculture, because it is going to evolve and change. At what cost? And will it just become an echo or a simulacra of the very thing that it was meant to be? You're almost fighting the very thing that you were fighting against at the beginning, and that's really the confusion of being like a MAGA goth. Like, even though those people look like a duck and quack like a duck, they're not a duck at the end of the day. Again, I will stand by that. So I'm curious what you think about, the alternative space, but that is a theme over the last few years that I've been seeing crop up more and more, and especially as we get into this supercharged election season, in the US anyway. I just want to reassure you that not all is lost. There are still plenty of alternative people who understand the root of the subculture that they're a part of, and it does go deeper, and there is an appreciation still and a love for the music and the art and what it represents on a deeper level. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm probably gonna get, roasted, but at least I'll be a roasted little sweet potato, I do love me some sweet potatoes. Let me know what else you would like me to talk or rant about. This was a largely unscripted video, so there's probably gonna be a lot of cuts, but I hope this kind of covered the gray, gay, and everything in between. So I always appreciate you guys watching, and this has been a big goal of mine to have some content to talk about and explore, because again, I really love the commentary space, and there's a lot of good discourse that can come out of this, and it can teach a lot of people things that might not be accessible otherwise in the form of like academic papers and other things that just aren't as accessible to people. So let me know what you think, and I will talk with you all later.